A reckless tourist, drunk and full of himself, does the unthinkable. He tries to urinate on a queen's guard. The crowd watches, expecting the soldier to stay still, to ignore it like all other provocations. But they were wrong. What happened next, no one could have predicted, and this tourist would never forget it. The midday sun beat down on Buckingham Palace, illuminating the waves of tourists swarming its gates. Cameras clicked, voices murmured in different languages, and excited visitors jostled for the perfect selfie. In the midst of the bustling crowd, Ryan stood out, not because of anything impressive, but because he was visibly drunk, swaying slightly with every step. His shirt was rumpled, his breath reeked of beer, and his eyes held the unfocused gleam of someone who had been drinking since noon. He and his friend Mark had been hopping from pub to pub, soaking in the London atmosphere one pint at a time. But now, standing before the legendary Queen's Guards, Ryan's alcohol-clouded mind latched onto a new idea, one that would make him the center of attention in the worst way possible. He had heard the stories. The guards didn't react. They didn't blink. They didn't move, no matter how much tourists yelled, danced, or made fools of themselves. Their discipline was unbreakable, their commitment absolute. That fact alone infuriated him. The thought of someone standing there, completely ignoring everything around them, made his skin itch. It was as if the guard thought he was better than everyone else, as if his mere presence commanded respect without a single word. Ryan wanted to break that. He wanted to be the one who got a reaction, who proved that these guards were just men in costumes, not the untouchable figures the world made them out to be. And he knew exactly how to do it. The idea hit him suddenly, stupidly and completely without reason, like most bad decisions fueled by alcohol. He would urinate right in front of the guard. A twisted sense of amusement filled his chest. This was it. This was his moment. A viral video in the making, something that would get people talking. Without hesitation, he shoved his way through the throngs of tourists, oblivious to the looks of curiosity and disgust that followed him. The air was thick with the scent of warm pavement and distant food carts, but Ryan only focused on his target, the silent, unyielding soldier standing before him. The guard's red coat was immaculate. His black boots gleamed under the sun. His rifle rested against his shoulder with perfect precision. His gaze was fixed straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Ryan saw that as a challenge. He stopped a few feet away, breathing heavily, the alcohol in his system making him feel invincible. No one stopped him. No one knew what he was about to do. But within seconds, that would change. The crowd at Buckingham Palace buzzed with energy, unaware that they were about to witness a moment of pure stupidity. Tourists continued taking photos, chatting, and marveling at the disciplined royal guard, but a few had started to sense that something was off. Ryan staggered forward, his movements clumsy yet filled with misplaced confidence. The soldier stood motionless, a pillar of tradition and discipline, but to Ryan, he was just a mannequin in a funny hat, a prop in his drunken comedy routine. A few onlookers turned their heads, whispering. Some watched with concern, others with curiosity. A group of teenagers pulled out their phones, sensing something viral was about to happen. Ryan's pulse raced, not with fear, but with the thrill of breaking the rules. He stopped just feet away from the guard, a lopsided grin stretching across his face as he reached for his zipper. A wave of gasps rippled through the onlookers. A woman shielded her child's eyes. A man in a business suit muttered a curse. The air shifted, filled with a new tension as more people realized what was happening. Ryan felt invincible. His fingers fumbled at his fly, the summer heat pressing down on him. The scent of warm pavement and city air filled his nostrils. And then, it happened. The royal guard moved, fast, violently fast. Before Ryan could react, there was a sharp, explosive stomp of a boot against stone. The soldier's rifle snapped into position, the polished steel barrel now aimed directly at Ryan's chest. The crowd fell silent. Then came the voice. Loud, commanding, absolute. "Stand back from the guard!" The words hit Ryan harder than a punch to the ribs. They weren't just words. They were a force, shaking him out of his drunken fog. His breath hitched, his stomach twisted, his knees buckled, and in front of hundreds of stunned tourists, under the unblinking gaze of dozens of recording phones. Ryan fell, right into the puddle he had been about to make. The moment Ryan's body hit the pavement, time seemed to freeze. For a split second, he was completely still, sprawled on the cold stone, his palms pressing into the wet ground beneath him. The realization of what just happened crawled up his spine like an icy hand. The puddle soaked into his jeans, the stench of urine rising around him, turning his stomach. And then, the laughter began. It started as a few scattered chuckles, but within seconds the entire crowd erupted. Some people howled with laughter, others gasped in shock, and dozens of phones were pointed directly at him, capturing every humiliating second. Ryan could hear it all. "Oh my God, did you see that?" The humiliation hit like a truck. His hands trembled as he tried to push himself up, but his legs felt like they'd turned to jelly. His body was still shaking from the shock of the guard's sudden reaction. And the worst part? The Royal Guard hadn't moved since. He was back in position, standing as if nothing had happened, his rifle secured, his gaze fixed forward. Unbothered, unshaken, untouchable. Ryan had been completely dismissed. The soldier didn't care enough to acknowledge him anymore, because Ryan was beneath him. That realization burned. Humiliation twisted inside Ryan's chest like a blade. He had come here thinking he could break the guard's discipline, that he could humiliate him in front of a crowd. But now it was Ryan who was the joke, and the whole world was watching. Ryan staggered to his feet, his legs still weak, his soaked jeans clinging uncomfortably to his skin. The stench of urine followed him like a cruel joke, a constant reminder of his own failure. His face burned, not just from the alcohol, but from the sheer, crushing embarrassment that now wrapped around him like a noose. The crowd was still roaring with laughter. Phones were still recording. He could hear every whispered comment, every chuckle, every mocking remark. "That's gotta be the dumbest thing I've ever seen." Ryan wiped his face, his breathing heavy, his anger rising. Not at them, not even at the guard, at himself. He had walked into this, thinking he was unstoppable, thinking he could make a joke out of a centuries-old tradition, thinking he could win. Instead, he had lost in the most humiliating way possible. He looked at the Royal Guard, still standing like a statue, completely indifferent to him. The very thing Ryan had tried to break, his discipline, his composure, remained unshaken. And that was the worst part of all. The guard wasn't gloating. He wasn't smirking. He simply didn't care. Ryan was so insignificant, so unworthy of attention, that even after everything, he was treated as if he didn't exist. The moment the guard had shouted and stepped forward, that was the first and last time Ryan had been worth acknowledging. Now, he was beneath him, a nobody. His stomach twisted as the realization fully sank in. He wasn't a rebel. He wasn't a prankster making history. He was just another drunk tourist who took things too far and got exactly what he deserved. And now he had to do the one thing he hated most: leave in shame. Ryan lowered his head, avoiding the dozens of mocking eyes staring at him. His soaked jeans felt heavier with every step, the smell of urine clinging to him like a cruel punishment. The once booming laughter faded into cruel whispers, but he could still feel their judgment. Phones were still pointed at him, recording every agonizing second as he shuffled away, his movements sluggish, defeated. The reality was sinking in. He had come here expecting to be the one in control. He thought he could outsmart the Royal Guard, break their composure, make them look ridiculous. Instead, he was the one who looked pathetic. Every tourist standing there would remember this moment, his failure, his humiliation. And worse, the internet would remember too. His mind raced. He imagined the headlines, the videos, the memes. This wasn't just a bad moment. This was going to haunt him forever. His breath shook as he glanced back, just once. The royal guard was still there, unmoving, silent, unshaken. The same way he had been before Ryan ever stepped forward. It was like Ryan had never even mattered, and that hurt more than anything else. Without another word, Ryan turned back around, pushing past the crowd, desperate to escape, desperate to forget. But he knew no one else would. Ryan kept walking, his head down, his soaked jeans chafing against his skin with every humiliating step. He could still hear the murmurs, the quiet snickers, the occasional burst of laughter behind him. He didn't need to look at the cameras to know. He had become a joke. His heart pounded, but not from fear, from regret. Not just for what he had done, but for how easily he had been put in his place. He had come here thinking he was above the rules, that he could turn a centuries-old tradition into his own personal stunt for social media. But the Royal Guard had reminded him, swiftly and brutally, that some things are not a joke. The soldier had only taken one step and spoken one sentence. And yet, it had completely shattered Ryan's illusion of control. The discipline, the authority, the sheer presence, that was real power. It didn't need jokes. It didn't need attention. It just existed. And Ryan? Ryan had been reduced to a footnote in someone else's vacation story. He finally reached the edge of the palace grounds, the laughter fading as the crowd turned their focus back to the next spectacle. They had already moved on, but Ryan hadn't. His stomach twisted as he glanced down at himself, filthy, humiliated, and worse, forgettable. He would leave London with more than just a ruined pair of jeans. He would leave with a hard-earned lesson. He had mocked discipline. But in the end, discipline had humbled him, and there was no viral video in the world that could undo that.